Continuing our discipleship study, we're going to be discussing today the topic of Buddhism. Now, once again, to reiterate what was said before about Eastern religions and other religions in general, if I'm going to claim that I believe this is true, then everything in conflict with it is, by definition, not true. If we're going to communicate the gospel with people, we should be able to at least meet them on their own terms, which is why I want to give you this crash course, essentially, this summary of what these Eastern religions are all about, the major ones anyway. I won't get into the various sects and so forth, but Hinduism and Buddhism are the biggest religions in the world right now, alongside of Islam and Christianity. So if you're going to have interactions with someone who prescribes to at least not just this religion, but this philosophy, this worldview of pantheism, that the universe is God, that the truth is relative, and so forth, this is what we're ultimately going to be addressing. Meet them on their terms, understand where they're coming from, and I'll give you a few examples of how to poke vital holes, towards the bottom, so to speak, in this clay pot, to understand this isn't a belief that can hold water. This isn't something that lines up with reality. Starting with the history, Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama, supposedly around 563 BC. The claim is that the universe is eternal, that to become one with the universe, you must follow the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which is the following. 1. Suffering, or dukkha, is what's wrong with the universe. Desire is what leads to suffering. Therefore, the elimination of desire is freedom from suffering, that they would call Nirvana. And abandoning desire is done through the Eightfold Path. Now, you'll run into a lot of different forms of Buddhism, but ultimately they will have these views in common as to who the Buddha is and how these are set in practice. Understand these are the basic rules. The right view, the Eightfold Path. The right view, which is to adopt Buddha's perspective on suffering in the afterlife. The right intention, to adopt Buddha's motives for removing suffering and pursuing nirvana, so adhering to the Four Noble Truths, so to speak. The right speech, his patterns for proper speech. The right action, his ideals for moral behavior. The right livelihood, to adopt Buddha's goals in serving bodily or communal needs only at complete abstinence to oneself. So basically, you meet your physical needs, but not in excess or in relishment of these things, just to keep yourself stable. The right effort, Buddha's balance in what you do and why. Right mindfulness, to adopt Buddha's distinction between desire and duty. And of course, right concentration, to adopt Buddha's meditation habits, what you see them doing most often. And finally, the concept of anatta, which in Buddhism is reincarnation. Your Atman, your enduring self. Some would refer to it as a soul, others not. But basically the idea that you have infinite lifetimes to remove dukkha, suffering, from your enduring self through reliving the lifetimes over and over again. Hinduism is different from Buddhism in that instead of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, we firstly don't know its founder. It's presumed because of oral tradition and some archaeological evidence that it was around 1500 years ago BC, or not ago, 3500 years ago by that logic, but it started in India. The books surrounding it are the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, and in Buddhism, the Udang Varagu. Now, I'm terrible at pronouncing these things. I apologize. I'm just giving you guys a summary. All these books really were poetic epics of the avatars, the gods manifested in physical forms, as well as the gods themselves that weren't accessible to the public until 1950, 80. So take that for what it's worth. But the claims in Hinduism are like Buddhism, that the universe is eternal, and to become one with the universe, you must work out your karma, distinct from Buddhism, through reincarnation. Now again, you could make the comparison dukkha, suffering, karma, good and bad being offset, but nonetheless, the claim apart from this as well is that not only is the universe eternal, but Brahman, the universe itself, the ultimate essence, has attributes in three main deities. But before you start making the association with the Trinity, recognize these three deities, the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer, who would be Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, respectively. Siva, if you prefer. But all of these deities have wives and children, so these are distinct gods, not a absolute God that reveals himself in three persons. There are over 330 million gods in Hinduism, and they all reflect basically their physical appearances. Some are elephants and some are cows and all these other different things. They look that way based on how much karma they have left to work out. And if you're a god, obviously you're closer to becoming one with the universe than others. Now, avatars are different from the gods in that when Vishnu, the maintainer, incarnated himself on the earth, he came in various forms. There was a turtle at first, or a fish rather, then a turtle, then a boar, then some sort of half lion, half man, then a midget, I'm not making that up, then a warrior, then 3 men, 2 of which have been distinct to be either Krishna or Buddha. Problem is we don't know if Krishna existed, and you have to specify which Buddha. So they just kind of leave it ambiguous, and then at the end, when Siva destroys everything, it'll be a horse. So taking note of that, on top of this belief that the avatars are the gods come to this earth in a physical form, how they came is different from when Jesus came, because it's essentially the difference between Greek mythology and Christianity as well. He didn't take the form, he adopted human nature. And that's something to also point out when talking to a Hindu or a Muslim, for a Buddhist. The caste system is also something that Hindus specify, that you are determined where you're at spiritually, as far as becoming one with the universe or not, in this lifetime based on where you were at previously, in your past lifetimes, and you can't leave it until death. Now, here's the sad part about that, and when you hear this out loud, you're going to be able to put the pieces together pretty quick. Where do you think the priests, the Hindu priest caste, that decides where everyone's at in this caste system is? Probably towards the top, right? I mean, they're not as high as, say, cows or pandas, but maybe that's why they're so endangered. But anyway, you got these kind of concepts that when you come back as an animal, it's like a sacred animal, like a cow, which is why Hindus don't eat meat, because they believe that your grandma's soul essentially is in that cow. And we both believe the same thing, right? It's wrong to eat grandma. It's just in practice, we don't believe that grandma is in the cow. So, or grandma is the cow, rather, although everything is the cow, according to this belief. We'll get more on that in a second. Anyway, so the priest, pretty high up, right? What about women? Impoverished people? Someone who has to suffer in order for the priest to be able to live the kind of lifestyles that they want to. Do you think they're very high up? Nope. In fact, the lowest caste for men or women, but especially for women, if you were born a woman, it's the lowest on the reincarnation stat. So it would be essentially in that culture, and according to this religion, the belief that you must have been a serial child rapist and murderer if you were born a woman. And based on that impression of you, they treat you that way the rest of your life. Now note, some people take it more seriously than others, but that is the sad reality. Now, when we're looking at this, kind of seems self-evident to be just a cultural construction that kept the priests on top and everyone else on bottom. But there's more problems with this than just the economic system. The belief of pantheism, that everything is God, the universe and everything in it, God is the universe, means that if God, the ultimate being, which is what we'll define, right, is the example of right and wrong, then everything in the universe is the example of good. And everything not of the universe is evil. But understand that good and evil both take place in the universe. The whole yin-yang concept, keeping good and evil in balance, good and evil are indistinct, which means there is no fundamental difference between a cancer cell and a human child. I'm being extreme here, but understand, if there is no fundamental difference between observing a sunset and observing the Holocaust, There is a reason we recognize the difference. If you have an impersonal God, there is no basis for morality, and if nothing else, you deny it. This worldview can't be practically lived out because we all understand there is something wrong with this universe. And in Buddhism's own claim, that's why it departed from Hinduism, because it understands there is something wrong, something that needs to be removed from this universe, something that is not right. But Hinduism and any other pantheistic belief can't make that claim, because in order to say the universe is God, that everything is right and it's relative, you're saying that nothing is wrong. And nobody is going to look at this world, even today, and be so deluded as to make that claim. Another problem is the concept of an infinite universe. Now, this doesn't just make sense, or doesn't make sense rather, philosophically, but also mathematically. Because think about it this way. If this video were to be sped up times 2, 1 second would become a half a second, correct? Now, if I were to slow it down by a quarter, 1 second would become 4 seconds, right? The extension and negation. It makes the video longer or shorter. Well, what do you think would happen if I got a really advanced computer system, little editing software and stuff, and when I was making this video, I slowed it down by infinity? How long would 1 second be? How would you ever finish 1 second? And that's the problem. If you have an infinite universe, there is no time. And as you can see, there is such a thing as time. There is a concept of decay. This universe had a starting point, and we're breaking down from that point according to the very laws of the universe. So in order to claim the universe is eternal, firstly, you have to deny science by the laws of thermodynamics. Secondly, you have to make the claim that, well, I guess it's just a nebulous concept then. We can't trust a concept like time. Well, good luck with your migraine medicine this morning, because you're going to be able, this morning or tomorrow night, what does it matter? There is no difference. We wouldn't be able to have this conversation if that was such a thing. So just understand that. We don't believe there is an infinite universe, but in order to make this claim, you have to neglect the fact that we are having this conversation right now. Otherwise, we'd have never reached it. Now, among the other things, there's some key details to understand when sharing with Hindus, not just in the claims for the pantheistic dilemma and the infinite universe issue, but in order to understand this, recognize rituals, meditation, and practice among Buddhists and Hindus, they all vary. You're just as likely to find Hindu terrorists as you are Hindu Girl Scouts, so understand it's not a well-defined system. These core details, though, are what they would have in common. Every Hindu and Buddhist that you meet is going to be unique. The only thing they're going to be able to share in common are these core details, so it's on them you need to address. Don't ask them what part of the caste they are. Don't offer them meat, firstly. Buddhists don't recognize the caste system, understand that as well, but just emphasize the need for a personal God and the person of Jesus Christ in history. If you understand that, and him not being an avatar or a good moral teacher, that's an important detail to make. Now, what are some clarifications, some things that you may get into conversations about with Buddhists or Hindus? Well, firstly, the concept of reincarnation is both in these religions but not in ours. When they would look at the concept of that in the Bible, we'd note it is given to man once to die and then comes the judgment. But then they'd say, well, look at Job chapter 1 verse 21. It says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Well, see, he's going to return again to his mother's womb. He's going to be reborn. You see this cycle of rebirth? Well, firstly, understand context is always key when reading anything. If you don't know what you're reading, when or why, and you don't read anything but what you've already assumed to be true, you're not going to form objective conclusions. So if I assume reincarnation, sure, I might be able to read into that unless I actually read it plainly. Because here's the problem. What does Job say when he says returning to where? His mother's womb, or returning to nakedness? In the context, he had just lost his family, his possessions, his home, everything that he could have material in this world, which I guess a Buddhist would look up to. And he said, hey, I came into this world with nothing. I'll leave it with nothing. That is the context he's saying. He's not saying he's going to return to his mother's womb. He's going to return to the state of being naked, having nothing, since God had just taken everything away, and now having nothing. That's the context. Clarify that. Another passage they turn to, and we've seen this before, Ecclesiastes 5, verse 15. As he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return. To go as he came, he shall take nothing from his labor, which he may carry away with his hand. Well, once again, context is king. The topic was finances and possessions, not your life force. Read the 2 verses that came before this. There is a severe evil which I have seen under the sun, riches kept for the owner to his hurt. But those riches perish through misfortune. Whom he begets a son, there is nothing in his hand. So understand those are some topics that you'll need to address and issues you should be able to respond to fairly quickly when discussing reincarnation. What about karma? Well, they'll say, well, John chapter 9 says, when Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And the disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? See, before he was born, he had a state in life that made a direct impact on his physical well-being. Well, read the next verse. Context is king. The disciples were wrong in assuming this man was born blind as a result of his sin. Verses 3 through 5 said, Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. So recognize that. Another important verse to understand when acknowledging a personal God, something to debunk this idea the universe is God, and to do so graciously, is firstly acknowledging Romans chapter 5, 8 through 11. God demonstrates his own love towards us, distinct from God. Catch that. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than, having now been justified by his blood, not our collective essence, his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God, separate from us, through him. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son. Catch distinctions between us and God and reconciliation that took place, not remanifestation. Much more, having been reconciled, we shall be saved through his life. And not only this, but we also exult in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we now have received the reconciliation. Look to passages like this and be careful to emphasize those points because it is key. Differences made between us and God and our redemption back to him. Not the working out of the separations between us. We don't become one. A relationship is restored. Okay? And another one is Acts 14, 5 through 17. You should turn from these vain things, right? Separate, to a living God. Catch that. The things and God are also made distinct. Not just the people and God, things and God. Who made, consciously, catch that, made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. In the generations gone by, he permitted all the nations to go their own ways. Yet he did not leave himself without a witness, in that he did good and gave you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying your heart with food and gladness. Another one, Psalm 19. The heavens declare, not are, the glory of God. They declare the glory of God. And the firmament shows his handiwork. Handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, night unto night reveals knowledge. The universe is a creation of God, not God himself. If you can establish these points, you'll be on the right track to at least letting your Buddhist and Muslim and Hindu friend know there is a better option than a system that essentially self-destructs. We care about them, we love them, and we want them to know the truth. And sometimes that also means pointing out where the lies are found in the other options. So with that in mind, I want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to going back into biblical themes once again. We'll be discussing the deity of Christ next time, and I look forward to seeing you all then.